Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. Done it again. We've got to Friday. How good? Let's be how gooding it with coffee. It's coffee number 3, and I can tell you it's just as good as the first 2. How good is coffee? All right, so not a lot of admin today, mainly because we have a guest sitting in the wings. Just a quick reminder of anybody in Nelson, we are open from 10 till 3 tomorrow. We're down in Couture Place, number 8. So if you're interested, come on in, check out some fish, because we've had some new fish come out and released. So, get your fish fix while you can. All right, that's enough admin, because I'm already beginning to rumble and mumble and jumble and bumble. So let's bring on our lucky guests. So good morning, John, or good evening, John. And
hi there, how are you doing?
Good, thank you, and hello, Jacob.
Good morning or evening, depending on where we are.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really appreciated. For those of you that don't know who Jacob is, he has a very good TikTok channel, Thompson Aquatics. A lot of educational information, lots of really, really good short form videos on all things aquarium stuff. So that's really cool. So thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And also today we are streaming on TikTok. I thought it was quite fit to do so, being that you're a TikTok creator. So we are streaming that on the Fish Room one. I don't know how that's going to go, but we're going to find out. So yeah, good morning everyone there.
Thank you for having me on.
Cool. So first of all, what got you into aquariums and tropical fish?
So I've been in the hospital off and on all my life, and a commonality is an aquarium to minimize the resulting pain medication that's needed in all of the hospitals in my area. So that kind of seeded my love of aquariums my whole life. Then I got a job at a pet store around 19 years of age, and that's what really threw me into the hobby. And from there, I just started researching, and I never stopped.
Cool.
You've got the bug then, well and truly down that rabbit hole.
What was your first aquarium, and what did you have in it?
My first aquarium was a 5-gallon plastic aquarium, mini bow front aquarium that had a single beta. And then eventually I took some poor advice and switched them out for a pea puffer before I learned about the schooling requirement, because that was not well known when I first started the hobby.
Yeah, a lot of people made that mistake actually.
Yeah.
Me being one. Definitely.
Yeah, but eventually I upgraded that one pea puffer to a school of 6 and a 20-gallon, and they lived for several years very happy until I had to leave them.
Fantastic. Did you have any luck spawning them?
Sorry, what was that? I have trouble hearing at times.
Oh, sorry, did you have any luck breeding the pea puffers?
Not at the time. I just set it up to be a nice, easily escaped, low-maintenance tank with aqua soil. So it didn't have the mosses or a lot of the required rock work in order to get them to spawn and breed.
All right. No problem.
So we were talking prior to coming on about what you do when you're researching your videos and stuff like that. Do you want to explain to the people that are watching what your process is for doing that, and how you go about basically preparing yourself for any of the topics or your subjects that you do?
Yep. So I use a few different sources for hobbyist level sources that are easier to read for most people. I use Seriously Fishing Fish Base. Seriously Fishing is a fairly comprehensive website that has majority of common species in the hobby. They use citations, so you can then look up the citations and find academic sources based on them. Fish Base I use primarily for water wild caught parameters, so that I can match them in case I want to breed them. They also typically have gut analysis in their profiles, so you get a really accurate sense of their diet.
Cool.
Then I will look up their scientific name and a few categorizations like habitat, parameters, behavior on Google Scholar, and then look up all the open source articles for those. From that, I usually get a pretty good idea of behavior, habitat, and what you really need to keep them.
Yeah, so you're really pulling in information from all different angles then to build your own picture of what's going on with the fish. That's really good.
Yeah, I always try to get multiple sources because there's always going to be biases, and by getting multiple, you minimize that as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did notice in one of your videos you were saying, I can't remember which one it was, but it basically said there's only, it might have been the clown loach and reports of them being bred, and you said there's only one, you've only found one report of them being bred, so you're not going to take that as gospel, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really good. I think there needs to be a little more peer review sort of stuff when it comes to the aquarium industry as a whole, and more people sort of trying to input some more information and double checking things like that as well.
Yeah, I
No,
think
they should, yeah.
research is very important for this hobby, and sadly, luckily I was able to take some courses on research methodology, which has definitely helped me interpret academic articles and such. But it can be difficult to learn if you're just a new aquarist. It's definitely something that you need to work at to understand and be able to evaluate articles eventually. It's worth it.
Yeah. So you've sort of outlined your process when you go into looking for a species. Is there specific things that you really want to be telling people or learning about yourself, or like do you have your own sort of blueprint of how you work through and how do you expand from there?
Yes, I first look at their behavior, see how they interact with both opposing fish, other species, and conspecifics, or same species. That'll give a really good representation of their aggression level and compatibility with various species, where they inhabit in the water, and what species they naturally exist with. It's another good angle. But their habitat is a good one too. I like to use Google Scholar for that typically, so that I can get a real good understanding of what kind of not decorations, but what kind of environment they live in, whether clear water, fast flowing. So the fast flowing environments tend to have fish that are quite intolerant of dissolved organic content and more sensitive. That gives a good idea of how hardy a fish can oftentimes be.
Yeah. Do you find that the information that's on there is always accurate, or have you ever come across, like when you go on seriouslyfish.com and it gives comprehensive information, and then you went on the Google Scholar and found a little known paper that says something contradictory to what you've read there? Yeah,
I definitely have had that happen. In that case, I typically analyze the academic papers, see what their research methodology, what their sample size is, and evaluate it based on that. If it seems like a reputable one, I'll use that one over the Seriously Fish, because some of the Seriously Fish articles have hobbyist information over peer-reviewed information, and are sometimes outdated. So I always look for the most up-to-date article and determine which one seems more reliable.
Do you ever find, or have you ever, when you've come across something that's hugely different, and the different, like the newfound information, you can validate much more than the original source? Have you ever provided that information to Seriously Fish to say, look, well, here's what I found, maybe you want to change your information? Or do you just continue with your own, projects so does that make sense?
Yeah, I sometimes add both pieces of information. If I think that something may not be reliable enough, I just don't add it, because the last thing I want to do is spread any kind of misinformation, because after a while people tend to trust what I say without researching it, and that's the last thing I want is to misinform someone.
Exactly, that's quite sensible, yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that you look through Google Scholar. That's something that a lot of people that we've spoken to talk about often. Is it's not that they're Googling information they're looking for. They're using Google Scholar and trying to find proper reviews and reports and stuff like that have been scientifically based, which I think is a bit different to what the general hobbyist does. So it'd be cool if more of that sort of information was put through into the hobby, and more people were looking into that as a source as opposed to just a quick Google.
Yeah. I agree. It's definitely something that I think should be more prevalent in some areas of the hobby because it gets you the most up-to-date information in a lot of cases, but a lot of people have not learned how to research due to education systems, and it takes a bit to learn that.
Yeah, it does. It's I mean, I've kind of ventured into the scholar side of research that's available online for researching for some blogs that I've done in the past, and it's a different format altogether. So for somebody that's not a scholar like myself, when you try and obtain information from these type of papers, it can be quite overwhelming. If you're not that way, if you're not that frame of mind where you're used to the format and things. So it would be good if there was a sub database, so to speak, that broke down and explained these papers in layman's terms. I think that would be very beneficial as well.
Yeah, and yeah, I totally agree with you, John. And I think actually what you're doing, Jacob, is kind of bridging that gap a little bit, processing these big thoughts and these big terms, and then filtering them into a way that people can understand. I think is key. And I think you're doing a fantastic, phenomenal job with that on a lot of your videos.
Thank you. I've actually been planning on making article breakdowns. Like I just made one on chemical signaling in green sunfish, where they did an experimental design to see if they had chemical signaling abilities when they took damage, and then produced a chemical, and they did it, and they showed high evidence that there was. I made a video on that, and it was kind of popular. So I think I'll be doing that more because there's a lot of interesting information that isn't at all common in the hobby.
Yep. So I've obviously been following you on TikTok for a little while, and there's a relatively strong theme that comes through is your love of pufferfish.
Yes.
So I thought we could we'll just
Sorry.
talk about that, John.
No, that was a mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I thought we could base a lot of our conversation today around pufferfish. It's something I know a lot of people are pretty keen on, and obviously you're quite knowledgeable when it comes to that. So I thought we could really expand on that. So at this point, just quickly, how many different varieties or species of puffers do you currently have?
I currently have 3 species of pufferfish, 2 of the Pale genus, which are the highly aggressive piscivorous genus that can sometimes be cohabitated with the same species, but it has to be done in a very specific way. And then 1 Congo pufferfish, which is of the Tetradon genus, but they are all ambush species which prey primarily on fish in the wild. So their diet is insects and fish for the most part.
How many? We're very, very limited the amount of puffers we can get. I think it's about 4 off the top of my head of freshwater and or brackish puffers. How many varieties and species are in the hobby where you are?
A few dozen. There are 6, I believe 6 species in the Tetradon genus, 6 or 8 species in the Crinotetradon genus, 10 in the Pale genus, and that's only the freshwater. There's a few scattered species like Glossum ocellus, the Amazon puffer, and then the Adon kakuti, which is a mixture of a piscivore and a molluscivore, so they need some snails but not much. And there's a half dozen species of brackish puffer in the genus that used to be primarily the Tetradon genus, but it was reclassified. I cannot remember how to pronounce that genus, so can't attempt it, but it's the Cedeon puffer, the green spot puffer, and the figure 8 puffer.
Cool. Okay. I know we've got green spots here. So what species do you currently have? Is it a hairy one?
I have the arrowhead puffer, Pale subali, hairy puffer, Pale biley, and then the Congo puffer, Tetradon murius.
Okay.
Yeah, the Congo puffer is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, they're very cool. Mine has changed from a 1/2-inch brown little blob into a orange/red, depending on his mood and attitude. 3-inch guy, but he's small for Congo. He was not from the best suppliers, sadly, and he was very underweight when I got him. So he was very.
How long have you had him?
I've had him for 6 years now.
Right. Okay.
So what is it about puffers that has piqued your interest?
Primarily the numerous adaptations that are quite unique in the animal kingdom. That's always been what's drawn me to learning about animals, is the numerous adaptations that are unique to them. And fish have innumerable ones. That's really why I like fish. But between the chromatophores, which change their color, their teeth, their spines, and their development synergistic toxins, I just find them very fascinating.
Yeah. It fascinates me that for a fish that is so cute, you can't get away from the fact they're cute fish. They can be deadly as well, and very lethal. And when they start eating, that cuteness, it's like the Chucky Timeston movies. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Cam, but it was like this cute little doll turned into a mass murderer.
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar.
So what are some of the different care requirements from species to species, or even the types that you've got? I'm assuming you're not housing them together. Are they individual species only tanks, or how do they kind of go?
It all depends on the group and genus of puffer. They reclassified a lot of the species in 2013 to better group them together based on behavior. The Crinotetrodon genus, which includes the pea puffers, the red-eye red-tail puffer, and a few other species, they are lescivore grazers, so they prey on mollusk invertebrates primarily, and then they shoal in groups, and typically like groups of 6 to 8 minimum, with a proper male to female ratio. Females are typically, for that species, less aggressive than males, or that genus less aggressive than males. So they're a group species. Then there's the Peo genus, which is what I have 2 of. They are piscivores, so they eat fish in the wild. They're extremely aggressive. Some, like the dragon puffer and the hairy puffer, can sometimes be cohabitated with the same species, but most of them should be kept by themselves. Same with the Tetrodon marius, which I have. That's why all of them are just by themselves in a decent-sized aquarium. Also, but the good thing about those groups of fish are they're easier to feed because they do not require snails in their diet to whittle down their teeth. Because they eat fish, the only way that their teeth are maintained in the wild is by biting fish, and then the bones slowly bringing them down. Because of that, they grow much slower and they're easier to maintain. They're a little hardier, and you don't need to feed them daily, which is nice because they're almost entirely inactive, so their metabolism is quite slow. I feed them Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays every week instead of daily.
Okay. Cool. Talking about the beaks, it was sorry, Cam.
No, far away.
Beaks, that was one of the questions I was going to answer or ask you later on. Puffer fish I've had, I think it was figure 8 puffers a long time ago, and they had the beaks, and it was something I was completely put off against handling because I was told that from different people at the time that you could use a certain mix to knock them unconscious in a little bowl of water and file them down, and that to me sounded horrific. But other people had said you can maintain it with just using shells, like ram's horn shells, but I never ever found that to be effective either. So I'm always interested. It's one of the first questions I ask people when they've got puffer fish is, do they have to help with the beak itself? So yeah, I suppose it depends on the species, doesn't it?
It does. The fastest growing beak of all of the freshwater species is the Amazon pufferfish. They're quite notorious for requiring a large amount of snails in their diet to maintain their beak, and then still requiring some beak trimmings in order to prevent them from overgrowing. I have a mutual of mine who has a group, and he feeds snails very regularly to maintain their beaks. It also depends on the species of snail, since shell densities are vary a lot. Malaysian trumpet snails are actually too hard, and they can oftentimes break the teeth of pufferfish. So those aren't recommended, along with a lot of comb snails. Their beaks are extremely strong. Their shells are.
Yeah, Malaysian trumpet snails are one of them for the smaller puffers anyway. They're just too difficult for them to break through.
Yeah.
That's why ram's horns are always a good option.
Yep. Ram's horns, and then for the small species, the pond snails and bladder snails, and then I know the Haka puffer keepers, they use like mystery snails that they grow out, or terrestrial snails typically.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a question off from the viewers. They've heard of people using clamshells next to the rapashi. Have you found this to be effective at all?
It definitely works. I know many people who keep mescivorous puffers who typically feed snails and such. They will use the rapashi on the clams on the half shell, and it will help maintain the beaks. It's not a complete alternative to live snails or other snails because they do not actually crush the shell, and that's what really whittles down the beak. They more so scrape the shell, the clam shell, which helps a little bit, but not to the same extent. It's a good way to supplement beak trimming, though, for sure.
And for me, I just sit here and go, that's another fantastic use for rapashi. I'm a massive fan of rapashi. I think it's a great product, and that just adds another we tick in the win column for it as well. Cool. Yep, would never have thought that. I don't get puffers, so it would never really have crossed my mind like that.
Yeah, rapashi's, I use it. I've been trying to get them to eat it. I have a gel mold that is shaped like worms. We try to trick them into eating them. They have always spit it out, which is so frustrating.
Yeah, as funny as it looks when they're tuning in and spitting out, it's I don't know if you've seen this, Cam, but most puffers they've got a way of like spitting it out but not letting it go, and they can kind of spit it out, rotate it, and bring it back in.
Oh, really?
You know, much like we are with chicken wings.
So, what key requirements do puffers? I'm using puffers as a general wording here, as far as tank requirements go, and inside the aquarium, water conditions, all that kind of stuff. I know it's going to vary between species to species, but as a general overview, what's kind of required to keep puffers healthy?
So most puffers exhibiting wallowing or burying behavior, so a soft sandy substrate is required. The Crinotetrodon genus, which includes pea puffers, they don't actively bury, but when they're startled, they will dart down and try to bury. If they have gravel, they can often injure themselves, and with their adapted scales, they can cause scrapes, which can trigger bacterial infections, and then that would not be good for a puffer.
Because they don't have scales there.
Yeah. With the wallowing species, they bury as a hunting tactic, so that's 100% required. It is natural behavior, and they will attempt to bury in gravel oftentimes and injure themselves. The Fahaka puffer and Mabu puffer are known to occasionally sit in the sand, but it is not as much of a requirement for adult Fahakas or Mabus since they do not often show that behavior.
Okay.
Other than that, live plants are generally good, especially for the group puffers. They help give sightline breaks and prevent territorial aggression with a lot of the Crinotetrodon genus and the Amazon puffers. It often also gives supplementary food sources for snails so that they can breed a small colony in there if they're able to. But oftentimes you need a secondary tank because puffers just eat so many snails, especially the pea puffers and other mescivorous species. They really just need a secondary tank to breed them.
Yeah. The first time round I had pea puffers, I had a 20-litre tank that sat inside my cabinet, and it was just filled with ram's horn snails. Absolutely filled with them. So every day you could scoop in and take out. And I mean, that was a hobby within itself, just keeping the ram's horn snails happy, but they keep them happy, so it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, most species of puffers end up needing a snail breeding tank, except for the kind I keep. That's part of the reason I keep the kind I keep.
Yeah.
So, like, I've seen in your videos, you feed them like red worms and stuff like that. So that's obviously a part of the diet. Is that a part of the diet because it's easy to feed them, or is that a real natural food source, digging around finding worms that are wiggling around, sort of thing?
They will definitely prey on invertebrates and terrestrial worms that fall into the water in the wild.
Sure.
It's mainly because it is a easy source of protein that has adequate phosphorus and low fat levels, which greatly mimic their varied diet in the wild, which is primarily fish and invertebrates. Because of that, it's usually about 50% fish and 50% insects like crickets, night crawlers, roaches, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sure. What are some common misconceptions that you've sort of discovered and found when it comes to keeping pufferfish?
The biggest one is that they only inflate when they are stressed. I have personally my large puffer fish that has the biggest personality out of any of my fish, my arrowhead puffer. He will inflate if he's hungry, if I'm walking by the tank and he wants attention, or if he sees his reflection and is just upset there's another fish close to him. But he, it's called practice puffing, and there's been only one time in the past 3 years I've had him that he is fully inflated from stress. That's because the light just randomly turned on and caused a reflection and it freaked him out. But other than that, he is only ever partially puffed, which is the equivalent of stretching or for a specific reason like getting attention.
Is puffing, does puffing up affect them negatively, or is it just a natural thing they'll just do all their life, no worries whatsoever?
If done to excess, past about the 50 to 60% mark, it can injure them. The organ responsible for inflation is actually their stomach, so it can affect their digestion for next day if they go fully. That's why it should never be antagonized and triggered, because they'll typically fully inflate, which can be dangerous. But just random inflating to a partial extent is pretty much non-harmful for them. It's pretty common and used to deter predators in the wild. Yeah,
that was my next question. Is it a defense mechanism that they do that for?
Yep, because what also happens is they have their severely adapted scales called dermal spines. When they inflate, they stick straight out and are a secondary way to deter predators from biting them, because they just kind of stick in their gums or their mouth.
So just quickly, like I said earlier, we're streaming on TikTok. For anyone that's watching on TikTok, this is a live interview that we do every couple of weeks. We're doing it over live on YouTube. If you want to join the conversation there, you can do, and vice versa. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can join us on TikTok for the same thing. You said you've got three puffers currently.
Yes.
Are you looking at expanding your, I'm going to use the word trooper puffers, or are you quite content with those three, or is there another group or species that you're really interested in and you're doing the research at the moment to potentially get another lot coming in?
So in the years that I've studied, I've covered most of the species. So I just look up the most recent academic articles every few months for research on puffers. But I have been wanting to keep a pea puffer tank again for quite a while. So I think I am currently setting up my third CO2 supplemented tank as a plant farm tank for common and uncommon plants. And then once that's set up, that will be primarily shrimp and then just a easy schooling fish. I have room for one more, which will also be a CO2 supplemented plant farm tank. That one will have 15 pea puffers in it eventually. But I need to get a few 10-gallon tanks and culture live food, so that's probably 6 months to a year down the road.
Okay. So when you say you're going to have a tank for 15 pea puffers, how big is that tank?
A 40 breeder, 36 inches by 18-inch width and 16-inch height. It's a very large footprint that's great for growing plants. And because it's not very tall, it allows me to not have to spend an exorbitant amount on light. so that I can grow these really difficult plants.
Yeah, good idea. And of course, pea puffers are tiny. So even when they're schooling, I think the largest one I've got at the moment in this tank is just under an inch long, which is the biggest one I've ever had. So yeah, that's one of the really appealing things about pea puffers is you can have a lot of them and enjoy schooling fish, and you get all the entertainment value of a large cichlid, so to speak, but in a tiny little fish. Brilliant.
Yeah,
Pea puffers are a species that are definitely here in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on care conditions for and care requirements for them? Because I know, like I said, they're definitely here. There's plenty of people that have them. So it'd be great to find out some more information and stuff about them.
Yeah.
Of course. A big part of pea puffers that is a common misconception is how varied their diet needs to be. I don't recommend a single food source being more than approximately 20% of their diet. They are a opportunistic grazing species which preys on an extremely varied diet in the wild based on gut analysis. They are benthopelagic predators, which means that they feed primarily on the bottom of the sand substrate, which has been shown from their gut analysis showing detritus in their stomach contents, showing that they feed on the bottom with the worms that inhabit sand and all of the little invertebrates living down there. Some key natural food sources are copepods, amphipods, detritus worms, and small segmented worms, as well as any kind of, I lost my train of thought, any kind of small insect that lands on the surface. Though that is not their primary food source, they will dart up to the surface if they see something. Typically, their water is fairly shallow and slow moving. They're from India. They inhabit, I think, 22 different rivers in India based on the last thing I read. Wow. Pretty varied diet. Varied habitat from black water environments all the way to clear streams. Typically slow to moderate moving, so high flow should be avoided for them. They need at least groups of 6. They have been shown to congregate in groups of dozens in the wild and show true schooling behavior, meaning synchronistic schooling behavior. They move in sync and they do it for reducing predation risks. Yeah. They require either live plants or lots of decorations to prevent excess open areas and increase sightline breaks to prevent territorial aggression. Otherwise, a dominant male will oftentimes pick on other males or stake out an extremely large area of the tank, leading to issues.
So John said the biggest one he's seen is around about an inch that he's currently got. What's a general size for a pea puffer?
General size, largest I have seen their normal range is about like 0.03 under 1 inch. I'm not sure what that is in centimeters, but just under 1 inch in length is pretty much the maximum size for the species. There's another species that is known as the imitator, Carinotetragon imitator, or the false pea puffer. They get about 1.5 inches. So usually if someone has an especially large pea puffer, it's actually the false pea puffer, which has a slightly different pattern but looks similar enough that a lot
Is this the one that's got red eyes? Is that the pea puffer that has the red eyes?
Oh yeah, the red tail puffer, that is Carinotetragon rubesco. They're one that I really want to keep someday. They're very
me too. They are. Just for anyone that was wondering, just under 1 inch would be about 2.5 centimeters. Yeah.
So I think for a long time, the concept of keeping pea puffers where they're an individual fish in a 10-litre tank or 2.5 gallons for people over in America. That's changed recently, and now they're more looked at as a group fish when kept in an aquarium. That's correct, isn't it?
It is. I've noticed a distinct change in both how people respond to pea puffer posts on Facebook. People are recommending them less for snail control because of their schooling requirements. And usually if someone talks about keeping a pea puffer by themselves, you'll see a lot of comments saying, oh, they need schools, because now there are actual videos of them congregating in the wild on YouTube and other places. So there's actual proof that they do this, which before it was not well known or common to know it at all.
Yeah.
It's definitely been a big change in the last several years.
So what would you consider to be a minimum group size and then a minimum aquarium size for that sort of group for pea puffers?
So minimum group size, I would say, would be 6. There is too high a risk and failure potential with a group of 3 from what I have seen. Usually, if you have 1 male or 2 males in a group of 3, first the dominant male will pick off the subdominant male and then go to the third one. And because there's not a lot, aggression isn't dispersed. It's the same concept that people use with African squids and tiger barks.
Correct. Yep.
Not exactly overcrowding, but just increasing group size to disperse aggression within it. But then the minimum aquarium size, I would say, would be roughly 20 gallons, which is a 30 inch by 12 inch by 12 inch aquarium.
And are you aware of any breeding reports of them in the home aquarium or commercially bred? Or are they predominantly wild caught still?
They are more frequently bred now in captivity. They tend to be not the most difficult to spawn, but you don't really have a choice. They either spawn or they don't. I know a few people who keep optimal pea puffer setups. They have spawned a couple times, but raising the fry can be difficult. They have not been successful with that. But commercial breeding is pretty common now. You can easily source a captive bred pea puffer if you really look for it and wait for it. But wild caught pea puffers are still quite common, which isn't great because it's affecting wild caught population densities now.
So that's not a sustainable option of wild catching them. Are they dwindling now because of the aquarium trade?
They're starting to, along with habitat destruction and pollution causing it. But the aquarium trade is a secondary factor for their population decline, based on what I've read.
Do pea puffers puff? That's a question that I get asked all the time. They do?
They do.
Yep.
It's very infrequent and uncommon for them, but I have seen, in my original school of 6, I have seen them puff up once, specifically after they got in a fight and one attacked another. So they puff up, but it's very uncommon for them to practice puff. They only do it as a defense mechanism, unlike some of the other species of puffers.
We've had another question here. Do your puffers nip at you if you put your hand in the tank?
Depends on the species, but it's always a possibility. I've been attempted to be bit by every puffer. My Congo and hairy puffer I've tried and missed once and never tried. Whereas my 7-inch arrowhead puffer has gotten me 3 times. One time he actually bit down with his beak, and that was not so good.
We've actually had a question off TikTok here asking if you finally got some pea puffers. I know you mentioned earlier you're a little while away, but obviously I can hear what you're saying, so yeah.
Yeah, I was going to get them in my second high-tech tank. I decided on a bunch of rainbow shiners as a future breeding project, so that is what will be in that tank. The main reason I decided to skip it is because my live food cultures were not ready yet, and before I get them, I want to have one for blackworms, one for copepods, and one for bladder snails, fully mature and ready so that I'll never have an issue with the food supply.
Absolutely sensible. So, sticking with your TikTok, just because obviously somebody's familiar with the TikTok page, I've noticed that you name your pufferfish. Perfect example is Henderson, the hairy puffer. Do you name all your pufferfish, or all your fish in general? Do you give them names like pet names, or was that just because it was funny for Henderson?
I just decided, well, the first one, I didn't name a fish until my first puffer fish, whom I named Corn Dog, specifically because one of my moderators saw the picture of when I got him, and he was a tiny half-inch round blob that looked exactly like a corn dog because his tail was clamped and it looked like the stick, so got the corn dog, and it just stuck. After that, I just impulsively either asked them or named them. The Harry Puffer was because of a childhood movie called Harry and the Hendersons, where it was a Sasquatch movie.
That's right, yeah.
I decided his name was I think the family names was Henderson, so I decided on that. And then I decided on a funny name for the large one, Puff Daddy.
Brilliant. I think the weirdest one I've ever come across online is the potato puffer. I was captured a few years ago. There was an Instagram account that was dedicated to this one particular potato puffer, and it just the way it just nestled into the sand really caught my attention. I know you mentioned before, but is there any of your pufferfish that do that, like bury themselves? I think Puff Daddy might be one of the ones that do that, isn't it?
What was that? I couldn't quite catch what you said.
Right, sorry. I'm talking about how some pufferfish bury themselves in the sand.
Oh yes, both my red puffer and Congo puffer do that.
Mm-hmm.
My hairy puffer is not a wallowing species. He wedges into decorations and cracks and crevices. So I have a bunch of rock work and driftwood formations in his tank instead of a sand area for him to bury.
Right, okay. Is there a reason for them burrowing in? Is that just a defensive thing, or is it something that they do every night when the lights go out, just to kind of get comfortable, or do you know what the reason is for that?
Yes, it's primarily a hunting tactic. Similar to groupers and frogfish who bury under the sand, or not groupers, flounders who bury under the sand, wait for fish to swim by. Since their prey is primarily active and they can only swim, pufferfish can only swim fast and short bursts. They're actually clumsy and they don't have a large energy amount, so they need to ambush them, bury under so they can't see them. So that when the fish swim from above them, they think they're rocks and they just pounce out, catch them, and then they have a meal. So it's primarily a hunting tactic.
I never thought about that. Thanks for that.
Of course.
So this is just going to lead into another question that I've got coming up for you. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, so if this is going to be a little too far, let me know. I was thinking if there's anybody in the chat that is, because I almost see you as a walking encyclopedia when it comes to different fish species. Like the knowledge is just so freely available, it feels like, at least. So if there's any sort of species of fish that people were interested in and would like to know a little bit more about, maybe chuck a comment in, and we can see if you've got all that at the top of your head, ready to rock and roll. If you're okay with it, of course.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Cool.
That's
awesome.
what I do in my life very frequently. Just ask for suggestions and then talk about the fish.
I had a feeling you'd be quite okay in having the ability to do that, but I just thought I'd double check. So if there's any questions about a specific fish people want to know about, please fire away, and we'll see how deep we can dive on said species.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Other than pufferfish, is there any other groups or species of fish that you're really, really interested in and spend a lot of time either keeping, researching, reading, listening, watching about at the moment?
Not at the moment. In the past, I did a moderate dive on axolotls and a few salamander species, but nothing to the same depth of pufferfish. Currently, I'm researching plant physiology and some of the more in-depth concepts related to aquarium ecology and chemistry to better my conceptual understanding of aquariums, but that's kind of dull, so I don't think many people would be interested in microbiology and ecology and stuff like that. But it helps me understand what's happening in the aquarium, so it helps that way.
Cool. One of our next questions coming up is about axolotls. So being that you've mentioned that, maybe we can dive into that for a little bit.
Of course.
What is it about axolotls that interests you? Obviously a little bit unique compared to some other aquatic animals. So what is it for you that does it for you for the axolotls?
So they are another fairly inactive species, but they're a fully aquatic salamander who does not go under metamorphosis. Because of that, they still retain their external gills, which I find extremely cute. They have numerous color variants, including azanthic, gold, albino, a bunch of others. I can't think of all of them to list them off, but there's a bunch of them. They have a very interesting ability to regenerate limbs due to their inability to develop scar tissue. We also have the gene, but it becomes inactive after about a month in utero. So we have the ability, but we lose it pretty quickly.
Did not know that.
But that's why they're able to regenerate their limbs and large body parts, organs, hands, stuff like that, because they do not produce scar tissue, and instead stem cells cluster at the end of the wound and start regenerating that way, which I find so fascinating. But to go on top of that, because they have the accelerated regeneration, it increases their risk of developing cancer. So they have a tumor suppressant gene, which makes them something like 1,000 times more resistant to cancer compared to us.
Wow.
Which is common with animals who have increased regenerative capabilities, because that results in increased cell mutation and a increased risk of cancer if they did not have these tumor suppressant genes.
Wow, I never knew that. That is very interesting. Like I knew they could regrow stuff, but I never knew anything about that cancer stuff. Wow, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, they're really interesting. They've been a big point of research in the past. Sadly, the populations are being inbred and hybridized with tiger salamanders, so we're getting farther and farther away from the original species. So research will eventually not be possible to the same degree it was in 100 years ago.
Do you think that's because people are consumers are looking more towards the different color stains? Because kids are, because of them, when axolotls were added to Minecraft, I think lots and lots of kids all of a sudden wanted axolotls. And I think that caused a huge influx, sadly, and people demanding different kind of color strains and all that sort of thing. So was that what you were referencing, or is there something else?
So about 100, 150 years ago, I think in the 1880s, 1890s, there was an original large group of axolotls brought into England and the US for research purposes. That population has been hybridized with various species, primarily other axolotls brought in from wild-caught populations, though there isn't much new blood being taken in the last 100 years. Because of that, they become increasingly inbred. The research population in particular is become inbred, but the hobbyist population is pretty good because of the large amount that is constantly brought in and constantly bred. The color variants are definitely influencing the quality of the individual axolotls, like any color variant will, but it's more so just the limited original population that we have. They've also been inbred with tiger salamanders, which is the main reason they are able to morph under instances of extreme stress, or in case of a research study, when injected with thyroid hormone, that will trigger the metamorphosis process as well.
Right.
That leads me on to a question I just wrote down. So, like, as a young teenager type of thing, a friend of mine had an axolotl, and the conversation was take him out of water, leave him out of water, let him turn into a lizard sort of scenario. Is that possible? Is it healthy? How does it work? Does it not work?
It's possible. Definitely healthy. Definitely a high risk that it will just die. So because of the interspersed tiger salamander genes into the pet store axolotl population, they have gained the ability to molt under extremely stressful conditions. So I don't even know the percentage that it would happen in, but it is an infinitesimally small percentage. Most likely, if you just take them out of the water, they will pass.
Yeah.
But it is possible. What will happen when they morph is they will lose their external slime coat. They will lose their external gills. They will become little nubs, and their head will become smooth. They will lose their webbed feet, and which will allow them walk easier on solid ground, and they will have a few other external characteristics which allow them to survive primarily on land for the most part after the metamorphosis.
Okay. So is it something that would happen in the wild, or is this purely from tank bred or lab bred species?
For this particular species, axolotl, salamander referred to as axolotl, they are naturally a fully aquatic species.
Yeah.
I need to do more research to confirm, but from what I understand, there are almost no instances aside from abnormalities in the population which result in metamorphosis.
Okay.
So it's primarily due to pet trade hybridization that
Yeah.
has so many to morph nowadays.
Okay. Yeah. See, I thought, obviously I've not done any research, but I always kind of just assumed that they would do that and they had the ability to morph because potentially their habitat in the wild would get polluted or too many predators or something, and it would be something that they would do in order to survive and move to another area. But obviously it's down to bad breeding and humans yet again, which is quite sad.
Yeah, I was the same as you, John. I assumed it was habitatural reason. It was a natural thing they could do. I know waterways run dry or dry season or something along those lines for them to find water to kind of get through that period, as opposed to humans being humans.
Yeah.
There's something from Rebecca. She says that iodine works with tadpoles to trigger metamorphosis, and she assumes it's probably the same with axolotls.
Yep. There in 1920s, 30s, there were a bunch of research studies that actually improved our understanding of human thyroid hormones. But they injected a bunch of hormones of various types, and a few of them triggered metamorphosis. So it is the same thing that happens with tadpoles. A lot of the same physiological characteristics change, like their scale structure, the dewebbing of the feet, and the slime coat decreasing.
We got ourselves a couple of questions up here. We'll bring Helen's one up. So, question about epistogrammas. Helen's kept them in pairs, but has recently read that they are better in harems. If harems, what number of females to males would you be looking at going with?
For most species, it's generally recommended to have one male to 2 to 3 females, depending on the exact species. Competitive stress or competition will increase the rate of breeding. Lack of competition will decrease the rate of breeding. So typically over 1 male to 4 females or more females, that will result in decreased competition. They will feel less stress and inclined to breed. So oftentimes they will end up breeding less. So if your goal is to breed the fish, then I would go with 2 to 3 females to 1 male. And then if you have enough hides and areas, do a multiple male tank if you can cohabitate them successfully. But that may end up with one of the males eating the fry of the other males to give more room for their fry. So there is a downside to that possibly.
So what size of tank would you recommend for having potentially 2 harems on the go?
It definitely depends on the species. I believe the McMastery is the Scrum Mac. I can't remember how to pronounce scientific name. Apologies. But that species tends to get a little bigger. The Cockatoides tends to be a little smaller, like 2.5 inches. But between 20 long for 1 pair, 40 breeder for 2 pairs, and then larger for some of the larger species or ones that have been known to be more territorial.
And obviously
that are a little more territorial. There are a bunch of wild species that are not common in the hobby.
Yeah. And obviously if you are trying to achieve multiple groups within the one aquarium, the more hide spots the better. To kind of divert eye contact and things, I'd imagine.
Yes, sightline breaks, both with pots. Terracotta pots are a great way to breed epistogrammas and other cave-dwelling species like Rubensis and dwarf circids. but also live plants or fake decorations to break up sight lines will help reduce aggression because they will constantly see each other.
Yeah.
Going back to your TikTok and your YouTube channel or pages or whatever they're called, have you had much backlash on what you're doing and people maybe questioning or not agreeing with what it is that you're saying, or has it been a pretty safe, for lack of a better term, safe space for you so far?
There's been some backlash. Some things people have questioned me on. I've explained my reasonings for it and gone back and forth at some point. Backlash is inevitable with opinions on animal care, but I try to explain my reasoning behind it and go from there. But yes, I sometimes do. For the most part, people are just happy to not have to do the research themselves and have access to it.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great credit to the hobby for sure, and putting in the time and effort to dig out the research and present it in a way that almost anybody can kind of process. It's really good. Thank you. I'm sure many people would be willing to say thanks for that as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said before, I think you've got the mix really, really good between like academic literature and general hobbyist stuff that most people can take in and absorb. And I think you've got that balance really, really well for the best part of what you do, which is really cool. So, yeah, keep on keeping with that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you both saying so.
When you're researching your videos and your species and stuff like that, do you have more interest on the fish that you've kept before or that you're interested in keeping, or is it just a general, it can be in an aquarium, I want to give this a go, or what's your methodology for selecting your species of fish that you deep dive into?
So about 5 years ago, I went through all the articles on Seriously Fish and just read them all. I still remember most of them. So at this point, I just make posts and ask for people to give me suggestions. And then if I don't know the species, I will research it. Most of them, I just need to do a small amount of research because in the past I've researched a bunch. But for the most part, I just go based on viewer suggestions. I save the comments in my favorite section, and then I go through the oldest ones. If I know it, I will do a quick research on Google Scholar because that's usually what updates more than the hobbyist sites, and then go from there and make a video.
So I want to put you on the spot for something that I want to know about. I'm currently in the process of setting up and building an aquarium for clown loaches. I'm finding it really, really hard to find solid, decent information on clown loaches. So I want to pick your brain a little bit. What can you tell me about clown loaches? More to the sense of tank mates that can go with them, general in the wild plant species that go with them, general layouts and that type of stuff.
Of course. So a big thing with clown loaches is they have a fairly wide temperature range, which ranges from higher tropical temperatures to moderate tropical temperatures. In Fahrenheit, it is approximately 76 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, so significantly higher range than most fish. Because of that, you can cohabitate them with some hotter water species like German blue rams, cardinal tetras, and others of the sort, while still maintaining them at a normal tropical temperature if you want to do regular fish. They grow very large, but they are not abnormally predatory. Because of that, you can keep them with moderately sized fish as long as they're fast enough to get away. As they age, they become less active and more sluggish. There is usually a dominant male. There has been evidence that shows that the dominant male exudes growth stunting hormones to stunt the other ones, which is why in the large group you'll often see one or two extremely large clown loaches, and then the rest will be mid-sized. I believe the largest recorded clown loach in the wild is about 20 inches in length, so extremely large, though that's pretty much impossible to grow to in captivity due to the unvaried diet that they have. And inadequate tank size for diluting water volume. They like a sandy substrate, primarily because as adults they'll just lay into cracks and crevices, bury a little, not really bury, but they'll dig up a little portion next to driftwood and then wedge themselves underneath between the sand and driftwood or inside the driftwood. Always make sure that you don't have any places that clown roaches can actually wedge into, because they have they have barbels on their lips, which when they're startled, and on their pectoral fins, when they're startled, they can get wedged and stuck in driftwood formations. If they wedge themselves in there, get scared, put their pectoral fins out with their spikes, and then they can just get stuck. I almost had that happen in one of my tanks when I did not realize there was a small hole in the driftwood, and one day 3 of the clown roaches were in that hole, and I had to take them out and remove that driftwood. It was not pleasant.
No. Yeah, they like to stack up on each other, don't they? They like a good pile up.
Yep, they are definitely a social species like most loaches. They like groups of 3 just for social reasons, not for shoaling reasons or schooling.
If you were attempting to kind of create a biotope themed aquarium for clown roaches, other than sparkling gourami, I think it is generally pearl gourami, sorry. Is there any other aquarium species that could get put on that list that you're aware of? Because it's quite difficult to find information on them.
Yes, I cannot think of biotope information off the top of my head, sadly. I've not looked into that in quite a while. Clown roaches is something that I researched about 3 years ago. Haven't made a profile on them yet since I started my TikTok page, so I don't want to give any incorrect information. So I'm not species that.
I'm struggling to find biotope fish to go with them. I was hoping I might find a Raspora of some description that might work with them, or something that wasn't a pearl gourami, but at this point I'm stuck with pearl gouramis as tank mates with them for the time being. We'll see how we go. You mentioned the hormones that the males release. Is there a way of countering that, like daily water changes of some sort to dilute it? Would that potentially increase the chances of getting a lot of big fish in one group, or how does that work, do you know?
Typically, diluting the water that is excreted through their urine and through their gills, which is where most of the growth stunting and hormones are released. Diluting it with water changes, either through a drift system or frequent water changes, would help with that. You do have to keep in mind that their growth is already so slow. It often takes them about 8 to 10 years to reach their adult length before they stop growing. They grow quickly to about 4 to 6 inches and then start growing at a frustratingly slow rate, slower than even the Paratilapia pollini or starry night cichlid, which is a notoriously slow growing species. That and the hastiest back nasty. They are one of the slowest ones in the hobby, which can make it difficult to long-term maintain the water parameters and diluting the water hormones, which makes them more prone to getting stunted through those ways.
And what would you recommend minimum group size to be and minimum aquarium size to be for them, being that they can get quite large?
I would recommend a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot tank. For the US, that is a standard 120 gallon. That is assuming that they do not surpass 14 inches in length. After that point, I do not feel that the length of that aquarium would be adequate, so I'd recommend upgrading it to a 6 foot tank. I believe the standard dimensions for a 6 foot by 2 foot is roughly 160 to 180 gallons, though I have not memorized the upper portion standard dimensions, so I'm unsure about that. Minimum group size, I would say 4 to 6 minimum. The larger the group size, the less chance of aggression between conspecifics, which does occasionally happen as they mature. It reduces as after their initial puberty and growth up to about 4 to 6 inches. They become lazier and less active as they age, so that also decreases.
Next thing is the migratory spawners. Majority of the fish in the hobby wild caught, or are they? Do you know much if they're being commercially bred or anything like that, or are they wild animals?
Sorry, what was the question? I heard migratory spawners and.
Oh, well, we can talk about that if you want. So they're obviously migratory. Do you want to explain what that is and how that works for clown loaches?
Yep. So depending on the time of the year, they will either be in large river systems, or during spawning season, they will transition to flooded forest plains, which are typically lower water volume, low, and very slow moving, low water volume areas. They will spawn in heavy vegetated areas. The fry will slowly make their way as they age up to about 6 inches to the main river channels. Once they reach about 6 inches, within a year or two, they will be back in where the adults are, and at that point, they will be ready to migratory spawn as well. But they go to these very different habitat to spawn, as you said. Migratory spawners, unlike most fish who just spawn wherever they are in areas of dense vegetation, leaf litter, lots of carsons and rasporas and cyprids, they just lay their eggs during breeding season in whatever habitat they're currently in. The males will fertilize and they'll just leave them alone. They don't exactly challenges to not raise their young, but they are there for longer than a lot of other fish who just kind of ignore them.
Yeah. And so it's around about the 2-year mark that they're mature enough to spawn, is that right? Or are they a little bit older than that?
They need to be a little bit older than that, yes. I cannot remember the exact age at which they are sexually mature, but I believe it's a few years of age. It's I think 1 to 2 years once they start going back to the main tributaries. Once they reach that decent 6 to 8 inch size, once they can survive there. But they slowly make their way back over their first few years of life.
Cool. That's all the information I have, all the questions, I have to learn about clown lodges, my upcoming project. So thank you.
Of course.
We do have another question that is loach related.
Yep, I was just bringing it up.
Our regular Rochelle. Okay, so here's a fish species question. Coolie loaches. I think I have 9 of them, but I've never seen them. What info can you give about them as a species, and how do you identify the genders?
So identifying the genders, I'll get through first. Okay. So look at the anal fin. Males will have a branched first ray of the anal fin, which will separate at the end. Females will have a non-branched anal fin. So just look at that fin. If the very first ray, or it's kind of like the cartilaginous structure of the fin is what a ray is. If it branches at the end, it is most likely male, though they need to be mature before they start showing this sexual dimorphism, which is the difference between male and female. Since I don't really use that term a lot, that's what it means. But that is how you tell male from female. Other than that, lots of sightline breaks in shaded areas. The whole aquarium does not necessarily need to be shaded for them to be seen more frequently, but having the option or a place to dart back to will greatly increase the rate that you see them. They just need to be able to feel comfortable in their surroundings, and they do take quite a while to settle into the tank. It also depends on the species. I know Pangeo semicito, which is the half-family coolie loach, tends to be less visible than Pangeo coolie, which is a true coolie loach or typical species of coolie loach.
Have you had any experience with the peril, the one that's a neon coloured one? It's not got much markings, but it's like a brown, but with neon blue, like a cobalt effect to it.
Pangeo bitiamac, the neon Sumatran loach, by chance?
Yes, that's the one.
A little bit. I recently did an animal profile over them. They're recently discovered species in 2009. They have this nice gray-brown coloration that varies as age and depending on light level. Exact same here, but they're still being mass bred and becoming more common in the hobby. They're still quite uncommon nowadays.
I find that they're much more confident than the standard banded coolie loaches. So I've got a group of each in two of my different tanks, and the neon ones, the ones we just mentioned, come out far more often, and they just sit out and they won't even try and hide sometimes, which is really, really good.
That's really awesome.
I know.
I've had much personal experience from other hobbies that I've heard of since they are a new addition. That's great to hear. Thank you for letting me know.
No, it's all right. All right.
We've had another comment from the chat from Brian. Oh, just flicked up. Basically saying that your level of fish knowledge is impressive, and I totally agree. It's mind-blowing. Like I said, I think you're a walking encyclopedia when it comes to aquarium species of fish, which I think is ridiculously cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've always had a fascination with learning, and from a young age, I learned how to accrue knowledge efficiently, and it's definitely helped me learn about the aquarium hobby.
Okay. So is it something that the memory storing information, is that something that you've had all your life, or is it purely on something that you fixate on like fish?
It is pretty much anything. I have never really needed to study. Even in college, I just read and remember things at a very high rate very easily, which is very convenient, and I like it.
Yeah.
Sure, plenty of other people would like that ability. I definitely would.
Yeah, I'd like to remember what I'm at the shop for when I'm standing there and I'm like...
What, without texting your wife saying, why am I here?
Yeah, and then you pick the phone up and try and phone them, and then, so you're a lucky man, Jacob. A lucky man.
Fire away.
Oh, sorry.
Have you found coolies get more confident as they get older?
I am not sure about that because I have not personally kept them, and there's not a lot of information that I have read based on when they're young versus old. I've heard of some accounts of them becoming less skittish, but that's all personal experience and nothing pretty peer reviewed that I feel comfortable sharing as definitive.
Anecdotally, I've found that, you see that? I used a real big fancy word. I just tried to keep up with everybody then. I've noticed that the more hiding spots you have in an aquarium for shy fish, the more they come out. And I'm sure the theory is that they'll come out because if they get startled, then they know they've got 17 different spots so they can just duck straight back into and feel confident again. So I always find it really hard when I'm talking to customers saying, you put some more plants and put some more wood and, find some more rock caves, that kind of stuff. And people are like, what? That's not going to work. But it does. It works the opposite of what you think because they're confident enough that they can, if a predator comes, they can just shoot away and they're safe again.
Yeah, I'm offering more darting spaces. It's the same for most species, really. The more hiding spaces, the more you see them.
100%.
Yeah.
We've had Silver just come up and say, you think it's wonderful to know there's people out there like you with this sort of knowledge that is floating around in the hobby. It's fantastic. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying so.
So you've mentioned prior before that creating educational content to make a positive difference in people's life is what you're all about.
Yep.
Other than us talking about what you're doing at the moment, have you had other people who have benefited from your content and say they've improved their aquarium keeping or their fish because of what you've been doing for them or been doing in the hobby?
Yes, I've had a considerable amount of feedback about being able to help people and people appreciating the information that I've shared, which has helped keep me doing it for this period of time.
Cool. It's been, 18 months or so you've been doing it for? Physically content creating?
Yep, I believe I started around October of a year and a half ago now.
Yeah.
You've been keeping aquariums for 8-9 years, is that right?
Oh, sorry, what was that? I didn't like it.
You've been keeping aquariums. You've been a fish keeper for about 8 or 9 years. Is that about right?
Yes.
Yeah.
How have you found the transition from aquarium keeper into content creator and not so much a wow, look at me, I'm creating content sort of guy, but more of a full-on educational, purpose-fit
Superstar.
type of scenario. Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of attention. That's something that is very, very me. But I enjoy teaching people, and I always have the viewpoint that if I accrue this much information, what is the point of accruing it if I do not share it? So for years, I was working at a pet store, sharing it locally. I didn't think I knew enough to do content creation, but eventually I felt I did, and I became sick and had more time and decided I'll start making videos about what I know, and people started to like them, which was surprising for me. I didn't really expect that at all.
No, it's the way you put them across. You, like we've said multiple times during this live stream, you bridge the gap between scholar, like the studies and the everyday fish keeper. So you're giving them the information that they need without them having to get boggled up and confused with the big words, which is great. Have you ever thought maybe writing a book with all the information you've got?
Yep,
Yeah.
I have plans to do it with one of my hobbyist friends. He actually has a PhD in entomology and is working on his second dissertation, so he's extremely busy right now.
Okay.
But we have plans to write a very comprehensive book, fully sided, very similar to the structure of Diana Wallstad, but it will be covering pretty much every available beginner and high-end concept, including aquarium ecology and microbiological concepts. It's way down the road because I'm not very healthy and he's extremely busy, but hopefully we'll be able to make it a reality in the future.
That would be really good.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always liked the idea of books. Any old smart like myself can write a website, but to write a book, I think, is another level of ability. So I'm always a fan of them. I might be able to over there, stack of books, get browsed through from time to time just to continue being sharp and books are fantastic. Some of your aquariums are fully aquascaped.
Yes.
Do you find? Sorry, far away.
Sorry about that. I just interrupted. I thought that you were just asking if most of them are aquascape, which they are for the most part.
Oh, okay. No, there was a follow on that. Do you find aquatic plants as a main or a decent interest for you, or is it the fish and then the plants that come into the aquascapes? How does that work for you?
It all depends on the point at which I am in the hobby. Currently, I'm researching a bunch of plant stuff, but the fish are always the focus, except for my newest tank. I am focusing on the plants because it's going to be some fairly difficult species. They require a low bioload tank, so I'm only going to have shrimp. But for the most part, the aquascape is meant to accent the beauty of the fish and help stabilize it with plants to help increase the fish health. It's all about keeping the fish in optimal conditions and making a nice display at the same time.
Yeah, balance.
Oh, sorry, John.
It's all about balance.
Yep. Yeah. No, I thought you were saying a little more than my stream's been a little bit scratchy for some reason, like it always is.
Oh, right.
You'd cut on at the same time. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No. I was just saying that, to get an aesthetic balance with harmony within the fish community, within your aquarium, is not easy. It's not.
Yeah.
I find a lot of aquascapers tend to put the design and the aesthetics ahead of the keeping of the fish, despite having fish in there. So, yeah, it's cool that yours is based on keeping the fish where they need to be, and then whatever comes with it after that point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I only have an aquascape tank, and that is my axolotl tank, specifically because they're such a niche animal. If I put plants in there, it risks them eating the plants and choking, so no plants. All it has is emergent terrestrial plants like alocasia and pothos growing out of it. But other than that, it's just a simple piece of driftwood. But it is my only unaquascape tank, specifically because an aquascape would not positively benefit the animal in the tank.
Yeah, totally agree.
Another thing that we've noticed that you do is you're rating other hobbyists' aquariums or your followers' aquariums.
Yes.
Do you find that the advice that you give for them is helpful? Like, if people come back later on saying, "Oh, we took that advice and we've sort of changed things a little bit, and there's been benefits to that"?
Yes, I've had a few people whom I rated or gave advice privately come back and say thank you for giving it. It's pretty simple stuff, just basing it off the rule of thirds and golden ratio, golden spiral, the rules of aesthetics, and then incorporating asymmetry into making it look more natural. Simple little tweaks that people just don't think of until it's pointed out.
Running out of questions here. We've flown through a little bit quicker than I was expecting, unfortunately. What have we got there? We've already discussed this one. We've discussed the beaks of your puffers.
Yeah.
We have run through all the questions far quicker than I expected. All right. Well, that's unfortunate. We've had another wee praise from the floor as well, again from Silver.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of praise for basically your knowledge that you have and the way that you're pushing it out to the world and the way you're doing it. So I think it's a fantastic thing.
I think the fact that your TikTok account has got over 8,000 subscribers, it just shows you that people find a lot of value in what you do.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised when it started gaining followers. I really didn't expect people to be interested in more dense educational content, but people seem to like it, and I'm happy that I'm able to share my information with others.
Yeah, I think it's the way that there's no messing about. You've got the fish, you've got yourself, and it's information, bang, bang, bang. There's no nonsense, really. And I think people, when they're wanting to find out about a fish, they know they can come to your channel and they can get the information. It's clear, it's reliable, and that's all people need, really.
Yep. And if I ever am told that I misrepresented something, or if I ever make a mistake, I always make a correction video or make a primary comment that I either pin or make it so that it's up top to correct myself, because the last thing I want is to share something that is not true, because that's
that integrity is something that you obviously hold quite important to yourself, which is fantastic, and that comes through with what you do. But it's also, you're not screaming from the treetops, you're not throwing random colors of everything everywhere to try and get attention. It's like, talking about fish, and this is what we're doing, and this is what it is, and I think that's what people really appreciate about what you're doing. So yeah, it's fantastic. We had a comment on the TikTok feed that says that you're a gem in the aquarium hobby, and I would have to agree with that as well.
Thank you very
Absolutely,
much.
Yeah.
So Silver would like to know, puff is your main focus, or what do you find your most attractive study?
So it varies very greatly. For about 3 to 4 years, I was studying all of the pufferfish species, freshwater and brackish species primarily. My first few years in the hobby, I learned general care requirements, some stuff about in-depth microbiology to better my understanding of nitrification, some on water chemistry, because I didn't really take much in high school. I had to teach myself chemistry pretty much because I was quite sick and I wasn't able to take some classes. So I taught myself that in the first few years. That helped me in my conceptual understanding. Lately, I've been focusing on plants and the concepts and physiology related to aquatic plant keeping so that I can better my cultivation skills. That is what I'm focusing on now. I also have a book called Diversity, Structure, Function, Essentials of Aquatic Biology. It's essentially grouping together all of the known fish, freshwater and saltwater, explaining some interesting adaptations, and then breaking down the physiology and the anatomical characteristics. I'm very in the early stages of that book, but it should be quite insightful once I finish reading it.
We've had a question from the TikTok feed. Ed's Aquatics would like to know, what have you found the most difficult in the hobby as a whole?
That is a tricky question. There's a lot of things that have been difficult. The initial conceptual understanding of certain topics like nitrification, some of the water chemistry concepts like the ammonia-ammonium relationship was kind of tricky at first before I truly grasped it. And then the ramifications on nitrification from that relationship and everything that it affects. That was kind of tricky because I did not take any microbiology courses in high school or college, so I kind of had to teach myself that. And then I eventually got to the point where I was up to the academic articles in microbiology, and then I could learn more, but it took a while to get to that point. That was probably my most difficult concept in the beginning.
I can understand microbiology isn't the most simple thing to know what's going on about. Totally makes sense.
There is a lot of little organisms that are in our fish tank that so many people do not realize are in there, including interesting photosynthetic ones that are just really cool.
Yeah. Another question from Rochelle. She'd like to know, what is the most reclusive fish that you own? And the top 5, do you believe, in the tank pecking order, do you think now is the peak of fish keeping and the aquarium hobby? So there's 3 questions in one there, I believe.
Oh, let me lean in so I can read it real quick. Most reclusive fish I own is the Congo pufferfish. He buries about 80 to 90% of the time and is rarely out or active aside from feeding. Top 5. Sorry, I'm trying to read this to make sure that I am answering it correctly.
I think maybe that top 5 might...
I'm unsure with that.
Might be a typo? Yeah. So do you believe that every tank has a pecking order?
For the most part, it does depend on the species, but most fish form a hierarchical pecking order, even schooling fish, which is indicative of spawning. You'll usually see the dominant male showing the best and most vibrant coloration when trying to breast females. Same goes for various cichlid species, and most fish in general will have a pecking order of some kind. Whether you disperse aggression enough to make it visible to you is really the determining factor, because if you don't have enough room, you won't have much hostile interactions and it won't be very visible.
Yeah. And do you think now is the peak of the fish keeping and aquarium hobby or industry, or do you think it's still to come?
This is definitely close to the peak. Since the pandemic 3 years ago, there's been a huge influx of aquarium hobbyists due to being stuck at home for extended periods of time. Same with the terrestrial and aquatic plant hobbies. I've seen similar things in various social media groups as new hobbyists come to more hobbies that can be home-centered. I believe that this is near peak or going to be peak for the short term, but unless legislature changes throughout the world or energy prices continue to increase, it is possible that there will be another peak when world events coincide to make it easier to keep fish. Because right now we're still getting over the issues with importing, especially in the US. We had issues with importing during the pandemic a lot, and we're past that for the most part, but some things are still restricted. Not because of the pandemic, but because of the result of the pandemic and global shipping after that.
Okay. So do you, sorry, keeping on the same kind of subject here, aquatic clubs and societies, is that something that you're involved in locally?
Not much. Mostly I just research. I sometimes go to fish club meetings and auction meetings to sell plants, but I am not very much into the local fish club scene, mainly because I am on medication which decreases immune function, so I have to be careful where I go, and who I interact with.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, before the internet, fish clubs were the only place really to get information, and it was passed down from generation to generation. So, I mean, particular people like yourself will be grateful that they can access that information now without having to go down to the local fish club and then let's navigate the social structure within those clubs.
Yeah, I want to get involved with it eventually, but
Mm-hmm.
for now, I just need to be careful because I get sick very easily now.
Okay.
And when I get sick, it gets pretty bad.
I've had another question from the TikTok feed. Is what do you think is missing from the aquarium hobby at the moment?
I missed the middle portion of that. Apologies.
What do you think is missing from the aquarium hobby or industry at the moment?
I think that a big thing that can be improved upon is the individual's ability to research, either through academic means, being more selective with what sources they use. But being a good consumer of research is so important in any research hobby or animal-oriented hobby because it constantly changes. I've seen Oscars go from 55-gallon to 75 to now some people are recommending 120 gallons because of the maximum possible size of 18 inches, making a 75-gallon
There you go.
impossible. But just depends on the fish, and care changes over time, so being able to stay up to date on that care is so important, and being able to research efficiently with the newest and most up-to-date information is very helpful for growing in the hobby.
I feel we're in a real golden era of aquariums, or just in technology in general and knowledge, because the internet's there. That we're just swamped with so much. Like 20 years ago, the information you got was, like John was saying, from either from a book or you'd get it from your aquarium group. But your knowledge was only as strong as like the 10 or 15 people in the room with you when you're talking about it. Now you can look on the internet and you can have 10 different websites. You can go to 10 different scholar articles. You can listen to half a dozen different podcasts. Like, there's so much information, so you've got to filter that out a little bit. But there's more knowledge there, and there's been more research done on every individual species and every individual waterway. So there's so much there that you can actually get behind and formulate your own thing. Like I said, Oscars were okay and smaller, and now it's bigger and bigger and bigger because the information is finally getting out there. And I think that's happening with a lot of species, and the general hobbyists, for the best part, the mindset's shifting a little bit more towards animal welfare as opposed to, I've got a glass box, I'm going to keep this fish in here just for my own entertainment.
I completely agree. It's becoming a lot more welfare and animal care based as opposed to a fish tank for decoration purposes as it used to be in the past. The information, I agree, has definitely helped with that a lot, and I'm very glad for that.
I think there's been, again, a bit of a mindset shift towards an aquarium's not an ornament to my house anymore. I'm keeping live animals and I'm keeping pets, and people want to keep their pets healthy, vibrant, and looking really good in the best conditions so they can get the best out of them and the pets can have the best life. And I think people are pushing towards a little bit that more as well with the aquariums and fish, which is, again, is a fantastic thing overall for the hobby.
I completely agree. It's great that people are becoming more pet and animal-centric with their care.
Yeah. And I think as well, as technology advances, it's becoming easier to keep fish more, in more suitable conditions. Filters are getting better. Plant lighting is getting better, which obviously increases oxygen and all that kind of stuff. Substrates are more technical than they've ever been. So there's a lot more out there for fish keepers to get it right, which I think is a huge difference to, maybe 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, I am very glad that I entered the hobby when I did, because this is definitely the most available all of the equipment and supplies has probably ever been, from what I understand. I remember talking to some saltwater hobbyists years ago where they were around 50 years ago when they were still mixing their own salts and trace elements to get coral growth, and it wasn't commonly available to have salt mixes. I can't even imagine that, because I just bought the salt mix and mixed it, and that was good. And I am going to be dosing and making my own fertilizer, so I kind of understand it now since I'm researching that. But
Yeah.
I cannot imagine. I really can't.
No, it blows your mind, doesn't it? It does.
Rebecca's made a good point that animal rights organisations are watching us, so we need to prove them all wrong, and make sure we are doing the best. And for the best part, I think most of the people in the hobby are trying that as well. We've had another question from our TikTok feed: is what's something you learned years ago that you now know is wrong?
Good question.
I will go back to the first main way I miskept a fish, the pea puffer. I watched a online video. I will not name the creator because I do not want to cause issues or clout, or there's really no reason for that. But I listened to advice that they could be kept so low when the information was not commonly available that they were schooling, and I kept them by themselves for about 6 months before I upgraded them, and that was something I thought was true, but is definitely not true now.
Yeah, again, I think that's a huge one now. The whole evolution of the pea puffer is a real prominent one. Again, a positive thing, but it's a real prominent one that people have changed their minds and the way to keep them and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. Yeah. Cool. So, like I said, that's the end of all the formal questions that I had. So, at the end of each kind of interview or the session we have with someone, I like to finish off with half a dozen really quick questions. We call it the School of Six. So we'll put you in the hot seat for that, and we'll see how we go. Ooh. Cool. So my first question is, heads or tails?
Heads.
Heads. Cool. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Coffee. If you could have a meal with anybody, alive or dead, at any point in the history of the world, who would it be?
That is a difficult one.
Sorry.
I've been asked this a lot, and I always struggle. I should probably say something related to the aquarium hobby, but I can't think of any of the main people in the past who have influenced it. Probably Tom Barr,
Cool.
because he has done a lot for plant fertilization and research in the past.
Hasn't he just? Yeah. He's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to anything that's got a leaf on it, basically.
Oh, yeah. He makes some amazing posts on Facebook about bonsai. I recently got into that a few years ago, and it's an amazing hobby as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. His compound is just remarkable. Some of them are huge.
Yeah, totally agree. Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Paper.
Okay. Do you believe that we're alone in the universe?
With the amount of exoplanets we have found that can have the possibility to make life, I do not believe that.
Cool. And what is your unicorn fish? This could be to either keep it in an aquarium, see it in the wild, take a photograph of it, anything at all. What would be your unicorn fish?
Could you restate that question? I'm not quite sure.
What's your dream fish?
Yeah.
Any fish. Any, if you could have any single fish in the world, what would you have?
A blue puffer. That is my dream fish.
That's your one? All right. Well, that's come to the end of my questions and everything else. So if you'd like to tell everybody that's still watching here where they can find you, your TikTok channel and your YouTube channel, so hopefully more people can enjoy what you're doing and get some great information out of it.
Thank you very much for having me. I've very much enjoyed answering questions and sharing what I have learned over the years.
Cool. So if you want to follow Jacob, he's like I said on TikTok and YouTube under Thompson Aquatics. So yeah, well and truly worth checking him out and following. phenomenal information and a really,
Absolutely.
really great way of delivering it. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And for everybody that has been watching, thank you very much. Again, really appreciate it. Yeah, we'll see you next week, guys. Have a good one. Happy fish keeping and catch you later.
Bye, guys. Enjoy your weekend. Bye, Jacob.